Kevin, the BMW DIY guy. My project today is the Pure Turbo's intake pipe upgrade for my car. Now, what is this? That section of pipe, so when you have your air intake, whether you have like a cold air intake or the OEM box where your filter is, that pipe that comes across the front of your car, and then that section that goes down to your turbo. This is that kind of U-shaped or L-shaped section that goes down into your turbo. Now, the OEM one is plastic, this upgrade is metal, which is great, so it's going to be stronger. But the other thing is, the OEM is necked down, it's narrower right as it gets into the turbo. So this upgrade has a larger diameter, so it can increase airflow into your turbo by just a little bit. This is a small incremental change, but it's just one more thing that you can do to support your car, support your tune, and even with the factory turbo to make a big difference. So I'm really excited to get this out of my car. Now, I'm going to say this a lot through the videos. I'm saying it again here. Check the description down below, because one thing that you're going to get to when you do this work is you're going to move your crankcase breather hose. That is a hose that comes up from your intake pipe and plugs into the top of your motor. That hose gets brittle. Now, mine's already been replaced, but the first time I touched it, so when I put in my oil catch can, the first time I touched my breather hose, it shattered. It gets very, very brittle from temperature. If you've never touched it, if you've never moved it, I'm willing to bet yours has broken or is really close to do so. So if you look down in the description, you're gonna find the part number for the breather hose. So before you do anything else, pop your hood, watch this video, pop your hood, go look for the breather hose and move it a little bit. Squeeze it a little bit. If it makes crackling noises, replace it. Stop. Don't follow my video yet. Look at the part number in the description below. Go order yourself a new breather hose, then come back, okay? Don't break it in the middle of this. It is possible to run your car without the breather hose, so like maybe you only have one car and you broke it and you have to go drive to a dealership or a place to go get that hose. You could potentially do it, but just avoid it. So I'm going to say this multiple times through the video. I just want to say it from the very beginning. Check that first, all right? Okay, with all that said, let's get out to the garage, let's get this work started and get this upgrade done. All right guys, so let's start out here in the garage. Let's talk about some basics first for setup. And one thing I want to call out before you get started at all. So first of all, jacking your car up, you're going to need to get underneath your car, so do it in a safe fashion. You can do this with a jack and two jack stands and just get the front end up. Obviously, I've got my quick jacks, which are really nice and I've talked about quite a bit. I'm just always going to stress, as I always do, anytime you have a car in the air, be super careful when you put it up. Make sure that you use jack stands. Do not use just a jack. Don't bet your life on a $5 hydraulic arm, right? So make sure to use jack stands. Last thing you'd want to do is be unsafe while you do this. So I really want to stress that. So obviously I've got my car in the air. With my particular car, I've got my strut bar that I've taken off because that holds that inhibits taking the cover off. So I've taken that off already. You may or may not have that. Check out my video for my KC Design strut bar. I think it's fantastic. So I've taken my engine cover off as well. So before we do anything else, before we talk about doing this job, this is your crankcase breather hose. This is extremely fragile. Now, if you've never changed it, if your car has a number of miles on it, this may already be to the place that it needs to be replaced. You just don't know it. So if you reach down in here and you press on it and it cracks and you hear it crack and creak, stop immediately. The part number for this will be in the description of the video. I've already replaced mine when I put in my oil can. So when I put in from Berger Motorsports that was sitting right here, it's taken out right at the moment. When I put that in, I pulled my breather hose off, and this breather hose just shattered, just completely shattered. The plastic gets really brittle and it completely shattered down underneath the cover under here. So I immediately had to go get another one. So before you do this work, check this immediately. You know, be really gentle, move this around a little bit, maybe press on a little bit. If you hear it crack and creak, stop immediately, go buy another one. You can get it at your local dealership, negotiate for price, or postpone and go get it online. The part number will be listed in the description. Please make sure to do that. Because what we're going to be taking out right here is your intake pipe. And this is the pipe that connects your air filter, in this case from CTS Turbo, connects down into your turbo down there. So you got to have the car in the air to get to the bottom, and you got to be able to get to the top. So I wanted to make sure to get us all set up first before we do anything else. Make sure to check that breather hose, please, please, please. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to unplug my filter and take this pipe off. Now, if you've got the OEM, it's going to be similar. There's going to be a hose clamp at this end. You want to unplug your MAF sensor right there, which is just pressing the clip and pull off, and then whatever it takes to get it off on the other end. The OEM will lift out. This is a little bit different because it's got a couple of bolts holding it down, but take this off. It would be your first step. So I'm going to take that off and I'll show you what's next. Okay, so here's the breather hose. I'm going to try to track down, and you'll see right where the flashlight is shining, see that little corrugated cable. Just beyond that, you'll see that's a T20 Torx bolt that's holding the other end of your breather hose in. So go ahead and just get a driver, T20 driver down there, or Torx driver, and go ahead and back that out. And then you can pull your breather hose free of the intake pipe from the turbo. So take that off next, set it aside. Like I said, be really careful with it. If it didn't crack or sound bad before, this is your chance to kind of gently manipulate it and work with it and see if it's got problems. The hose is not all that expensive, but if it's shot, definitely replace it while you have this opportunity. All right, really quickly here, you can see it's out. And then you just depress on the little clip to unplug the sensor that's here in your breather hose. So we'll just pull that off. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get underneath the car because you have to pull your belly pan off. That's going to be a whole bunch of 8mm bolts to hold your belly pan on. So I'm gonna take all of those out and set my belly pan aside, and then we're gonna look at this from underneath, and I'll show you where the intake pipe connects to the turbo. All right, so this is a bit of a rough camera angle. It's almost easier to see than it is to describe in film. But let me point out what we're looking at. So we're underneath the car, passenger side wheel, here's the drive shaft, right? The belly pan's off. If you haven't taken that off before, you probably got a face full of gravel. Not a lot of fun. You take all those 8mm bolts out and then drop your belly pan and put it out of the way. Now I'm gonna slide in. So again, here's the drive shaft on this side. Gonna slide in, and I'm gonna point here best I can, and I'm gonna move a couple of different angles. So if you see, let me slide over to about here. Now, ironically enough, see right here, see that corrugated end of the plastic right here and that nut right there? That's the end of your turbo, and that's the end of my intake pipe. It's actually just pressure fit in. So as I was pulling on it, I actually pulled it out entirely. It just came clean out. So it's out right now. There's nothing you have to do to really do much to get it off. Now, I want to point out, see with my screwdriver right here, hopefully, right there, you can see, man, this is a difficult angle to film, let me tell you. So there's a nut right there on a post. When you look at your new intake pipe, there's a loop that's going to go around that post. So we have to get that nut off. So again, let me see if I can get a better angle. There we go. So hopefully you can see now. You can see the end of that corrugated plastic. That's the end of your intake pipe. You take it out by just pulling it and sliding it out the top. So now let me get it out, and I'll show you what it looks like in comparison to the new one. And that nut right there, as you can see. Let me get the size on that nut, and we're gonna back that nut off. All right, so we've got a 10mm nut off. The other thing I've noticed is that I also have a little metal spacer that was between the nut and the body of the turbo. So I've taken this little spacer off because when you look at this, the flange here on the new pipe is going to act like that spacer, and that nut is going to go, you know, right here, right? So I took that spacer off. Now so let's look at why we're doing this in the first place. Now, a couple of things. You may need to take that nut off in your case. I've seen examples of the inlet pipe where there's a plastic loop, and a plastic loop would be right here, and that nut is holding this in place. In my case, I didn't have that at all. It's not like it's broken or anything, or I've broken the flange off. It's just smooth plastic. So this was just pressure fit into place, which is interesting and actually makes me wonder if it's been loose for a while, because, you know, I've manipulated this pipe quite a bit with my air filter intake, and I wonder if I've maybe wiggled this loose at some point. So I'm especially intrigued to see what happens when I get the new one in. Now, here's the other reason why we're doing this, beyond plastic and breakable. But look at the neck. You can see right here on the original, well, this necks down really significantly. You've got the diameter of the pipe, and then right here at the end, it necks down really quite a bit. So that's going to change airflow. Forgive background noise today. So you can see the new one's in play. You got the new one, you've got the old one's out. So all you have to do is just take the new one here and then just slowly feed it down into place and just wiggle it to get it past, you know, all of the obstructions and get it out of the way to get it down in here. And it'll just take a little bit of doing to get it in here. Now, the one other thing that I wanted to point out before it goes any further is you've got a different screw here for your breather hose. So that is going to be a 3mm Allen, and you might want to take that out beforehand, right? So take this little screw out beforehand, because that way you're not trying to take it out while it's down here, take it out, potentially drop it, put it back in. So take a 3mm Allen right now, and go ahead and back that out. So then you only have a chance to drop it once, right? So I'm going to take that out. You're not going to reuse the screw, that T20 Torx screw that was going into plastic. So this is metal into metal. I'm going to take that and set that aside for a moment. So like I said, and just slowly work it down. Now, the loop on this has to go around that post, and you might be able to see that from up here. All the angles on this are kind of difficult to see, but just slowly work it down, and you can get it to the point where you start to work it into place, work it past all these cables and all the hoses, and work it down into place, get it over that post, and press it in. And you can see there's gaskets on the end of that. Press it into your turbo. Make sure it's over the post with this 10mm nut, and then put the nut back on. So it's really hard to show, but it's actually a lot easier to do. So let me get this into place. All right, so the pipe's in place. So what I wanted to do is I half unbolted one of my pumps and pulled the hose out of the way, because I wanted you to be able to see, or actually looking at the angle here's a little awkward, right? But you can see the 10mm nuts back on, that spacer. You definitely didn't want that. And then when we get back up to the top of the car, I'm going to kind of show the pressure that I used to kind of down and in to press the pipe into place. And I got it probably 80% of the way in place over the post, you know, that flange over the post, about 80% or 85% of the way in. And then putting the nut on and cinching it down brought it the rest of the way in. The other thing I did is I put a little bit of oil on the gaskets to help it slide into place. But you can see it a lot more clearly now on where it's sitting with that pipe in the way. So hopefully that makes a little more sense. So let's look at the top of the car now. So it's a little difficult to see without staring straight down into the motor, but here's the top of the pipe right here, right? So you can see it in place. So I actually had one hand here on the top, and I used a rag to help just get a good grip on it. Then I actually slid my hand down the side to where the port is for the breather hose. I could kind of get my hand there to press forward. So I kind of pressed down with my right hand and pressed forward with my left hand and pressed it into place. And see, now it's just rock solid. I mean, obviously it's completely in, and with that nut on, it's not going to move at all now, which is great because the previous one really moved around. And I'm really intrigued now, and I'll know once I get this job done and I'm driving the car, but I'm really intrigued now because I've got a suspicion that my intake pipe was at least loose. And I'm wondering if it was bleeding air around it, you know, if it was so loose that it was bleeding air. Because once I took my pipe off here and I just manipulated the old one with my hand, it wanted to come free. It was almost like the breather hose was holding it in place. So I really think it was very, very loose. And it may be that the turbo was sucking in most of its air, not through my filter, but just down through the engine bay. So I'm really intrigued to see what happens. So now what you're going to want to do is take your breather hose, speaking of, right? You've got the flange here where your little 3mm Allen is going to go in. You're going to fit this down here, you know, into your new pipe, and then onto your crankcase right here, because it's your crankcase breather hose. Don't forget your sensor wire, so make sure to plug your sensor wire back in, okay, and get that all plugged back in, just like that. It only goes one way because of the tab on it. Okay, so go ahead and get that into place. Put your 3mm in, don't drop it. There's a gasket here as well, so just fit that into place and then fit your breather hose in. And, you know, to keep it in frame, yeah, bummer, I broke one of the little flange hooks. It goes in so tight that I think it's going to be okay. So I'm not too worried about it. If I broke two, I'd replace it. But I think I'm going to be all right. So all you need to do is fit this back into place. So the next steps are fit the breather hose back into place, which I'm going to kind of just set over here for the moment, get it out of the way. So the breather hose is here, and then you've got your coupler. You've got it's a flange coupler. One side's bigger than the other. Small side will go on the pipe side, which just fits on nicely like that, and then we'll fit the my intake pipe back on as well. Now we'll go in here. There's two hose clamps, smaller and larger. So smaller will go on this side. So what I would actually probably recommend, let me get this flange back off, or this coupler back off. So I'd put it on first. And always make sure to put the little crank nuts in a place where you can get to them easily, right? So don't put it at a weird angle sitting at the bottom or something like that, right? So just put this into place like that, in a place where you can get to the hose clamp right there, like that. And then I'm going to fit the other pipe back on. So let me get the breather hose done. We'll get this done, and then we'll get my air filter pipe back on, and we're pretty much done, which is a good deal. All right, all done and installed. So let's walk through this really quickly. So as you can see, we've got this all bolted in and we're good to go. Clamped down really good with these hose clamps. So it's good and solid. That moves a lot less than it used to. So I feel really positive about that. My breather hose is on. As I mentioned before, if you have an older breather hose, if you didn't break it already, if it wasn't broken already, you might probably broke it already. As I've called out several times, you very likely, there's a good chance you're gonna have to replace this while you do this work, because these get so fragile. And I had to bend it. You can see it's got a little bit of a kink in it that it didn't have before, because the vent connection right there where it connects in is a slightly different angle. So the hose is coming out at different angles. So it's now kinking it at a different angle or bending, which if it was fragile and brittle, it would have broken for sure. So man, please make sure that you've got yourself a spare breather hose if it's fragile, and I hope you checked it first like I advised you to. Okay, so let's walk through it really quick to make sure we're done. So that 10 millimeter down below is on and connected and good. We've got the 5 millimeter Allen bolt here holding this in place. That's on my breather hose, is connected and set and good to go with my broken clip, which is a bummer. This is all set here. My intake is back on, and if you've got the OEM or an aftermarket, my intake's back on, connected here. My sensor's plugged in, my filter's on. So I'm pretty much good to go. So all I need to do at this point is put the belly pan back on and your engine cover, and you're good to go. All right, back inside, all my tools put away, everything all cleaned up. Took the car for a spin around the block just to make sure that it ran well. As you can see, this is not a hard install. It just takes a little bit of work, a little bit of time, and really can make a difference. You know, this change like this isn't gonna make like a 50% difference in your car. You know, very hard to find one thing that'll do that. But if you make 10 changes that make 5% difference, suddenly you've made a huge difference in your car. So I'm really excited to have this in. Like I might have mentioned earlier, I'm not entirely convinced my OEM pipe was actually in place, or at least if it wasn't out, it was really close. And it didn't have that flange to keep it in either. So you might be in the same situation as well, where you find that your OEM pipe was loose or maybe even out. So having this all secure and in place is going to make a big difference. That improved pipe, that big metal flange that goes over the post, is going to make a big difference. It won't ever come out again. So I'm really happy to have this in. Thank you to Keys Motorsports. Thank you to Pure Turbos. I cannot wait to drive the car and get a sense of how this feels more. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I'll see you soon.